out there. So it's good feeling. I am sleeping well again.
What was your biggest pain point, the biggest stress issue that you had while writing the book?
The biggest stress actually was a problem I didn't have. So many people told me, do self-publishing because publishers are gonna kill you with the editing. It's gonna be very problematic. They are gonna force you to change the whole book and all of these things. And I was panicking about what would happen once I send it for then they do the editing. And it was smooth actually. So I suffered for something that didn't really happen.
Because you published with Pearson, right?
Yeah, that's
If
correct.
I remember correctly, yeah. That's the experience that I've heard. At least that's the thing that I hear about Pearson a lot because they're very thorough. They're really big. Uh, they do things very well, but that also means there's a rigorous process. But so you didn't suffer from any of that.
No, I didn't. And one thing that Pearson told me was my manuscript arrived quite clean already. Maybe it was my fear I overworked, kind of. So I did actually 5 beta readers iterations. So it means that at least 30 people had provided feedback, and I had addressed more than 5,000 feedback points on the book. So once the editors took the manuscript, they changed the flow, not the structure. They didn't challenge the structure. And I already had reviews from industry known people like Mike Cohn, Marty Kagan. So the book arrived with all of these reviews on it already.
Was there something that you had to fight for? Like
Yes.
some what was it? Tell us about it.
So the truth is, I had rejected the initial offer, and there was a reason for that because I would not have the final word on the text. So Pearson would own the copyright, which is normal for publishers. That's something I could live with. I could not live with changing some of my favorite words. Example, bullshit management. So Pearson told me before that some things they would probably ask me to adapt. And there is a sentence there I say in the book like, "This would be the fanciest piece of crap ever created." So aggressive, bullshit management, aggressive, and that set me off. So I was concerned. I rejected the offer, and then after this, Mike Cohn read my book and he said, I believe your book has potential and should be published. He talked to Pearson again and he supported me quite a lot. He invited to be part of his series or to publish as a standalone book. And then he gave quite, let's say, a support to me that Pearson was willing to accept this thing, bullshit management and the other aspects. So then I got excited. I said, all right, let's go together now. So that was something I had to fight for.
Nice.
Didn't that scare you as well? Like these super heavy industry giants like Marty Kagan, like Mike Cohn, those are the kings of the industry by now. Like,
Yeah,
doesn't that scare you to send to ask them for feedback?
it does indeed. But, you know, once I start blogging, all of this goes back to 4 or 5 years ago. I realized that many people are willing to help you if you ask, but you need to make peace of mind that some will say no or some will just not say anything, and that's okay, that's fine. And what I did, I approached some people I respected and I asked if they could read my manuscript and say what they think about it, if it's any worth of going live in their perspective. For my surprise, 50% of people I approached, they said I can help you. Some ignored, some said, well, I'm not interested, some just ignored. But when I approached Mike Cohn, whom I read several books, he was very supportive and he was honest. He said, I don't have time now, but if you approach me later, maybe I have time. And I kept trying, and once I got him in a good moment, he read the book. And with Marty Kagan was similar. And Marty Kagan told me the following: "Is the book ready?" I said, "Kind of." He said, "You have only one shot. I'm not going to review the book for a second time. So if you send it to me, it should be a version you are confident, because I'm going to tell you either I give an endorsement or I don't. That's it."
Nice. So, as a product person, how did you? It sounds like you found that type of interaction where they set your expectations and gave you reasonable expectations useful to you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you don't see in the workplace enough with products, where like me, and maybe it even comes back to this idea of bullshit management. Like, I'm curious if the pushback you got was on the potential for a word like that to offend somebody, or if it was some other thing, because many of us, my co-host included, we favor plain talk. Like, we talk like adults, we talk to adults, to very, very smart people. If you mean a shovel, say a shovel. If you mean bullshit, say bullshit. Like, most people are able to handle that. So how does this idea of like plain talk and bullshit management apply to your book and the point of your book?
So it's how I write. My book is the idea I'm talking to the reader. And I said, I'm writing this as if I'm having a coffee with you. And when I'm having coffee with someone, I'm not going to hold back my words. I'm going to say what I think. I'm talking to the person. I care for the person. I'm not going to say, well, I think when you receive an output-oriented roadmap, it's something that's not that nice that you may need to adapt. I'm going to say what I think straight to the point. I will say, that's going to trap the team, and big chance you are going to create something nobody cares, but you meet the deadline. Everyone is happy short term, but it's a big bullshit. It's not going to drive anywhere. So it's on the talk. And the reason, that's a very important thing. The reason I started writing the book is because a few people approached me and said, I like the way you talk, because you talk things that are real. And they said, you write from a perspective that is what is happening with 90% plus of product managers who do not have a chance of working for the big companies, the big famous tech companies. Because when it comes to Netflix, Meta, Google, and all of it, they do have a lot of funds. They do a great job. But for them, if they fail a small project, they survive. But if we are working here in Germany in a small company and so on, it's a different game. It's not the same game. So it's hard to get funds, very hard. And you have a different pressure. And if it fails, you may even lose your job. It can happen different things. And most people face this kind of challenge where the mindset doesn't come from a tech company where product and tech are in the center and you just go from there. Actually, it comes from a mindset where product still serves the business. And I decided to write talking as I talk to people, saying what I think. Of course, I'm not cursing in the book all the time, but it's plain talk. It's directly what I see and going straight to the point, not going around and trying to apply a little bit of makeup here. No, let's talk about reality, how it is. That's the very first part of the book. I say, let's face reality. And once we face it, we can understand it and do something today for a better tomorrow.
It's interesting in that sense as well, right? Where a lot of people, if he would actually be speaking, a lot of people are swearing. I mean, all three of us included, especially all three of us. However, if you put it in words, if you put it in a book or in an article or whatsoever, it's completely different. All of a sudden, people are more offended faster when it's in a book, rather than they would listen to this conversation where fuck would fly around constantly. It's a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah. And something that Sunder and I have talked about when we're not recording, David, and I don't know if there's a word for it, but one of the things that I have found as you find yourself in rooms with smart, and I say rooms, proverbially, with smarter and smarter people, with intelligence comes the ability to craft a statement, an argument, a position that's unassailable. Like, you can't be wrong, you can't be right. You always have an out. And I really don't know if people do it on purpose or if it's just innate in many of us. And I'm sure I'm guilty of it many times as well. But part of being candid and plain talk is saying, I know you said that. This is how I made me feel. You asked for my opinion. I gave you my opinion. And then I have found that they tend to come back, well, I didn't say that. And they become, big on grammar and being pedantic and specificity and all that. Do you find that applies to product managers out there? Is it a good thing or a bad thing for them to preserve that? Like, I understand the ability to, or the need to preserve options, to not paint yourself into that proverbial corner. But how do you balance that with not having an opinion on anything?
It's a tricky thing. But for example, going back to the book, it's about vulnerability. I say that focusing on requirement is bullshit because you will understand the wants and you don't know the needs, and you focus on delivering exactly what people tell you to deliver. But then I write in the book, when I started my career, I was anything but a product manager. I was a backlog manager. So I say that I'm talking there in the book about 10 things that lead to bullshit management, but I say, don't worry if you feel like you are doing more bullshit management than product management. That has been the story of my life for many years. What is written in the book are things that I did, which I'm not so proud of, but I learned something from it and I moved beyond that. So I'm saying that I did that. I'm not saying that you are wrong now and you're stupid. If I'm telling you are stupid, it means I was stupid as well. So I just think it's a part of learning journey. And when it comes to all of this conversation in product teams, I see people kind of minding every single step, what I say, and that is very harmful for the collaboration. It creates this fake harmony. And now that I have a higher position and I have the chance of helping things happen, what I do is I want people to learn how to provide feedback to each other. And the way you provide feedback can be quite helpful. So you can say how you felt about a situation. And generally, when I see people going to provide feedback, it's very quickly jumping to interpretation. For example, someone says something like in a very aggressive, then you say, you said something very aggressively. You are offending me. Then you are already accusing the person. You are offending me. And if you say differently, the tone of your voice made me feel uncomfortable. Just stop there. Just stop there. And then you can have a conversation, because you stick with your feeling, and your feeling is your feeling. No one can judge that. And this helps the conversation get better without accusation and anything. And then the person may say, oh, I had a bad day today, and I'm sorry for that. Then step back, and then you restart the conversation. But if you don't do anything about it, then it's, as you said, you don't know where everyone stands, and everyone is kind of playing a game with a mask on the face.
Yeah, I think that the F word that you're talking about, the feeling word, is more egregious than the other F word. And it's interesting, as you're telling this story, I realize I am doing like micro reviews all the time. People like my co-host and other colleagues and friends will send me something like, hey, I'm about to post this to LinkedIn. What do you think? I want to release this video. What do you think? I want to write this. What do you think? But I'm not Mike Cohn. I'm not Marty Kagan. And a lot of times I'll say, it makes me feel this, or what are you trying to evoke in the people? So I'm of the camp that feelings matter, but I'm also in complete agreement that you have to choose to feel offended. You have to choose, like, you have to own the 50% that you have in that feeling thing. And I don't mind when I send something to somebody and they said, this makes me feel like you're an asshole, or this makes me feel like you're being this. I don't mind that, because that's their feelings. But I tend to ask them, what about it makes you
Yeah.
say that? Is it my choice of words, or is it the entire content, or what? And I'm not saying that's right. And I definitely don't react well as I'm on the receiving end of something candid, nor do I always handle it well when somebody reacts poorly or in a way that I would not prefer to something I created.
How do you approach it? This is a question to both of you. How do you approach such a situation if you know that there's an event coming up? For instance, take a sprint review or product increment review, whatever you want to call it. And you know you're going to be receiving feedback on a thing that you enjoy because you have put your heart and soul into this. Is there a preparation step that you take before that? For instance, I don't know, meditations. And this might go sideways because I might get feedback that I don't like. So how do I deal with that? Are there any steps that you take before these kind of events?
It's a very important question. Many people overthink, you know. So I do have a routine. Every morning I have some meditation, some stretching before I even look at the phone, before I start working. I like having a cup of coffee before looking at everything because then I start the day well and then I don't overload my mind. So that is one thing I do, a routine. And that's not the before a sprint review or anything. All the time I do that to remember I need to stay on the present. And one thing that I used to do in the past is like thinking about scenarios. What happens if I receive feedback here? What happens there? What happens there? Then I would go in a rabbit hole because there are endless possibilities. What I do right now is I react according to the situation, but I react in a way that I am mindful and I name my feelings. So I try being clear. For example, someone attacks. There are attacks sometimes saying, "Hey, this is what you created is worthless." And then I say, "Worthless?" And then the person's gonna say, "What?" I just say worthless to see what else the person's gonna give me. Because worthless doesn't help me. And then the person says that, I say, let me be clear. This is your opinion. When we tested with users, for example, this is what we learned. So I try bringing some more part to the conversation. And I ask, given all of this evidence, do you still perceive as worthless? So I try coming prepared if it is something about product review and having a conversation and moving from like useless, worthless, nonsense, like what is nonsense, what is worthless, or for trying to make it more concrete and not generalizing. Because sometimes I see what can get tricky is a generalization, like all the time the quality is bad. So that's something, it doesn't help. Actually, it is detrimental to the collaboration. So this is one thing. But the other thing is about stepping back. Everyone is on the same boat. It's not a competition. So if someone is giving a feedback and it's a harsh feedback, I say like, I'm sorry, I feel like we are losing eye level here and this is hard to collaborate. We are on the same boat, by the way. We are trying to reach the same goal. So what are you telling me? Are you afraid that what we create is missing the mark? Let's understand that. Let's address the problem. And that helps going back to a different conversation. So what is the common ground we can find?
You've got a question coming from Stas from our YouTube audience asking would you use the same approach with either an impatient, blunt, or but very important potential investor?
Well, it depends on the situation, but I would be clear because there was one thing that happened my whole life. When I worked in Brazil, my first time, didn't take long to get the nickname which I wrote in the book, which was Mr. Y. And I asked all the time this question, why? I was a software developer. And I remember someone coming to me, and in Brazil, like people ask, like, who do you answer to? The translation for that would be, who is your boss? And who do you report to? But the question was, like, who do you answer to? I said, well, I answer to whoever asks. So I talk to people and I want to treat everyone the same. I don't want to start putting people in pedestals and so on. Because the core of everything is about collaboration. And if it's an investor coming to you or somebody else and so on, the investor is also collaborating. So we do need to find common grounds. We do need to have eye level. I don't want to have an investor who is always diminishing the product, who is always playing against. We need to play the same game. Otherwise, you don't want to talk to that investor, which will make the collaboration more harmful. The investor will be unhappy. You will be afraid of talking. And there's no good outcome out of that. Not one that I can imagine.
The book's called Untrapping Product Teams. Are these corporate structures? Because you mentioned report too, and that shit always gives me goosebumps and a rash. I don't care who you report to. But is that part of the trap as well? That we're always thinking in these structures, whom do we need to report to, and what do we need to report? And it feels to me, and this is just a big assumption that I may be making you a little bit biased on the answer, but it feels to me that we're spending way too much focus on these structures and hierarchy and I don't know what not, and not really focusing on the outcomes and the actual uses of the product, and therefore trapping the product team.
Yeah, that's something I didn't write that much in the book. I wrote about team structure, what would be a good one and what would be something distracting. I also wrote about the danger of HIPPO, the highest paid person opinion, which we all know what happens, define everything. But, if you only have opinions, then you're going to go with the HIPPO. But when it comes to these, you mentioned report to and all of these things, I go back to the question, are you doing product management or bullshit management? And what the heck is bullshit management? It's an art, and it's the art of draining your energy doing things that create no value. And then the more bullshit you handle, the less value you can create because you don't have energy. And the question is, if you don't know how what you are doing creates value, why are you doing that? And then let's go back to your example. Who do you report to? You create a hierarchy and everything and so on. How does that help you collaborate? Because in the end of the day, creating digital products is all about collaboration. So I remember when I started my career, people would ask me, what do you do? I would say, I talk to people. And I talk to a lot of people. The magic happens when I can find some alignment in this conversation, and together we create something meaningful. But the disaster happens when we get loaded with noise and we don't know where we are going, and everyone is going a different direction, getting worried about different things.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the effect of your title, because so I just did a quick Google while I was listening to you about these books about product stuff, and it's not even just product books. It's a lot of books in this domain, right, of modern work, design, innovation, transformation, all that. And there's a lot of common words that come up: trap, factory, problem, fix, forget, crux, hacking. Is it broken? A lot of those things make it seem like there's a huge problem. Look, I understand how book titles are marketing, and in some cases they mean the difference between somebody buying your book and not. I'm just wondering how bad is it right now as an industry for product management and product ownership and any of these product terms? Because I hear it everywhere, and it feels like I'm hearing about it far more this year even than I did last year.
So I started writing this because of my journey. So I worked for, I think, 11 companies full time, and all companies that I worked for had different traps and different scenarios, things that were going wrong. And it's not because the companies were bad, they just didn't know another way of working. That's how they were used to. And then they were running in circles. In the beginning, I did think I was the problem. I didn't know how to do my job. And then I moved from Brazil from a big corporation to a startup. I saw different things, but they were related to the same problem. that we would go in extensive product backlogs. We would go in maximizing velocity, the same things that happen in the big ones. And then I moved to another startup in Brazil. And then we start having the same trouble, business telling what to do and teams implementing that without asking why. Then I moved to Germany, and then I got stuck with frameworks and processes and all of that. And then I started consulting companies worldwide, New York, Australia, and different places, and I started seeing the same things. And what I recognize today is I wouldn't say the scenario is bad. I would say it's possible to be better. So I say, like, instead of complaining that we are missing this framework, we are missing this, we are missing that, the whole idea of the book is saying, like, if you do this, big chance you don't collect value out of that, or you are betting too high. So if you look at an output roadmap, what is the problem with that? The problem is you think the solution is right when you are not sure about it. So you may invest like 3 months on that, and then after the 3 months, you have one shot. If the solution was right, you drive value. It's just a too high of a bet. If you think on outcome-oriented roadmap, you can make smaller bet and find something that works, and what doesn't work, you drop it. So I think it is possible for product teams or companies to try de-risking their ideas faster than they are doing. There are many opportunities there. So the book title was not focusing on driving sales or this. It was focusing on my reality. I have fun on driving change. I get energy from that. Whenever I see that I somehow contribute to a team creating value faster, anyhow, can be in different ways, I get a lot of energy. I said, maybe more people could get energy from that as well.
Another question coming from the chat. What in your opinion is the most important personality trait as a product person, and which hard skill to untrap teams?
The most important for me would be resilience. Being a product person is hard. You are going to receive hard feedback. You are going to hit the wall in different ways. It's kind of a Rocky Balboa stuff. It's not about how hard you can hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. So I think that is the most important one. And the other aspect that will help the person move on is the tool that is behind the ears, the brain, the mindset. In the beginning of my career, I did think that knowing all the frameworks and all of this was the most important thing. I was fanatic about Scrum. I was fanatic about all of this. But I would ask wrong questions. I would ask questions, how do you do discovery with Scrum? How do you do this with Scrum? And that's not the right question. The right question is, how do you do discovery? And if you're working with Scrum, figure that out. That's all right. Start with the right question. So the mindset, when you have a value-driven mindset, you can figure out what is this thing you can do right now to increase the odds you are doing something valuable. And the question you need to ask is not how fast can you deliver something. It is how fast can you drop bad ideas.
This is indeed, like, discovery is part of it, but also the delivery and validation. And a lot of organizations still focus or feel, pretend, or whatever it is, but they're stuck to thinking these are phases. Now we have a discovery phase, and then we have a delivery phase, and then we have a validation phase if they already do one. But this is not the case. But what's your opinion on this?
My opinion on this is we like being in control. And if we treat everything as phase, we can put things inside boxes, and we can put price tags on them and think we know how much we're spending, we have a plan, and we feel the plan is right. So it's a kind of something that Martin Dauman wrote extensively on his book, Driving Value Sprint Goal, is we inject speculation a lot. We go in a meeting room, we put more speculation into that. At some point, we believe it's the right thing to do. So the problem is, as humans, we don't really like feeling unsafe. We don't really like feeling that we are taking risks that endangers us. And then we go to all of these phases. That's the moment where I say it doesn't matter anymore the agile framework you are using. If you're thinking like that, if you use Scrum, it's become a water Scrum fall. If you, yeah, it's if you use another framework, maybe you say, no, I don't use Scrum, I don't like the cycles, I use Kanban. Okay, it's just a disguised waterfall anyway. So the thing, my opinion about that is the mindset. When we have a fixed mindset, we use everything that we know to plan to step forward. When we have a growth mindset, we use what we know to uncover what we don't know, and then we can adapt. So the plan will not become the goal. The plan will just enable us to step into the unknown and continuously iterate that. But it's hard to do that. And sometimes you need to ask for forgiveness instead of asking for permission, depending on where you arrive. There are different ways of trying out things. And the best ones for me is like run an experiment, collect evidence, share what you learn with the others. Say, this is what I learned. Does it make sense still to bet on this feature? My evidence suggests not. I tested with 10 people. What do you think? Have a conversation, have a dialogue. Move from opinions to evidence-based conversation.
And Sunder, to come back and answer the question you asked us earlier, now look, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but I've co-opted a meme. That's cool story, bro. So CSB is my acronym for that. And it's kind of my way of politely, in a non-threatening way, say, that's a cool story, or those are a lot of feelings and opinions, but what's the data show? Like, cool story, bro. What's the data show? What's the survey show? What's the customers say, etc. And I welcome people when they do it to me. The concern I have, and I feel like this is one of those paradoxical things, there is no answer to this, is I've got a lot of evidence in my career of when you start to change the culture to being more evidence-based, whether that's with evidence-based metrics or just cool story, bro, show me the data, or somehow somebody like David or one of us saying, let's go test this theory, let's go de-risk by getting some actual empirical evidence. Some people, some percentage of people, and it's different by culture and by company and whatever, will start to build a case like a lawyer going off to sue a Fortune 500. And that's not normally what we want, because we don't want to come to a meeting a month from now to see that somebody has spent weeks and hours and a lot of their thought to create a case, because they could be arguing a case that's irrelevant, that we all agree. And so how do you balance that, David, between like doing enough but not making it a cultural thing or a habit where people over-index maybe on data and proof?
There are the two extremes, right? And both of them are bad. The extreme focus on delivery, which is many nicknames we are going to have, which is like feature factory, and there's no discovery. The problem of this is when everyone focuses on building the present, somebody else is going to build the future. But then we have the other side of the coin. We learn about all the cool things of discovery and so on. Then we go all in and we resist committing to delivering something because we lack enough evidence. So then I say, when everyone in the company is focusing on building the future, actually somebody else is busy building the present. So we need to have a balance. Some people are going to call as a dual track agility. Marty Kagan now is using more like continuous discovery from Teresa Torres. What I say is very simple. If discovery something takes longer than delivering, there's something dramatically wrong happening. So we need to learn faster than it takes for us to deliver. Let me give you a real example about the book. We're talking here about my book. I was giving talks already about untrapping product teams and so on. And then someone came to me and said, hey, I really like this untrapping product teams. Where's the book? And so on. I said, all right, what do you want to learn? And then the person told me, yeah, I feel like I cannot do product management in my organization. So I had a conversation. Then first I said, can I write a book? Should I write a book? Do people really want to read another book about product management? We already have a lot of book, and we do have good books. So what I did, first thing I said, how do I learn here? First thing I posted on LinkedIn, I said, I'm writing a book and this is what I want to cover. And I had an assumption that people would be engaged with that kind of content, and I would see what would happen. So the post initially got around 300 engagement there, loads of comments, and then I approached some people who commented. I interviewed them. So after that, I crafted a table of content. So I was making incremental investment there, but I started delivering something because I still had a question in mind. Can I write the bloody book? Because actually, I have never written a book. I have actually written several blogs, which is a very different thing. Then I said, how do I know if I can write a book? I will take the core of the book, something that I think is very relevant. I'm going to write that, and I will give it to people. So I will test two things with this. One, I can write it, and two, the message will deliver value. So I created a product strategy guide, put on my newsletter as premium to limit the amount of people who could consume. And that was something of 10,000 words. By that time, I had never written anything of 10,000 words. I put there and said, let's see how people react to that. And you know what happened? People misunderstood my message when I put that level. So I learned that the way I would write there was not hitting the mark. It was missing something. But I also learned what helped them. So I tweaked a little bit. But to write this guide, it took me just 2 days. And my investment was incremental. What I tell people is like product discovery is not something you go out and you disappear. You need to get evidence in the beginning in hours. Post on LinkedIn, that's what I did, hours. Interview people, hours. Then run a survey, a few days. Then you start scaling. Then write a guide. To see the result of a guide, it took a week. I'm not talking about a few weeks. It was a week. And then I said, okay, now I can create the manuscript. Discovery is not an excuse not to deliver anything. They are connected. We do need to deliver, but we just need to deliver faster so we confront reality. We need to figure out how we make that happen, not to get lost in the discovery trap as well.
Wow. Sorry. So I just wrote down, I got to tell you, Senator, and I would like you to react to these. So I just wrote down a number of things you said, David, to remember. Discovery is not an excuse to not deliver anything. I mean, I think that's a soundbite right there. We need to learn faster than it takes to deliver. I think that's another amazing soundbite and takeaway from this. And I'm paraphrasing this last one, but some people are going to focus on building the present. Other people need to focus on building the future. And yeah, like to me, I just wrote those three things down in the last 10 minutes. Sunder, what it looked like you wanted to say something.
Has nothing to do with what you just stated, but more with the process that you experienced before, because we know each other from Serious Scrum. Part of the way that I learned how to write my articles, and now the book that I'm writing with Ryan, is also because of the feedback that you provided me on the platform and through Serious Scrum. Are there any things that you have picked up? Because you mentioned that writing a book is very different compared to articles. Are there any things that are different or similar with writing articles compared to a book?
So let's talk about what is different. So a blog is simple. So you want to share an idea in a concise way that people can consume and they get a takeaway by the end of that. In general, that's what I try to do with my blogs. There are different styles, maybe share a case study, but it's something there. It's independent of anything. You can write different books, right? I try to write a book that has a story and people can read that from beginning to the end. So it has a red line. So it has a concept that you continuously revive that people will connect to. For example, one of the things I mentioned in the book several times is like coordinative and collaborative flow. And then all the time I mention that. But I still want to write a book that people can read differently. Let's say I don't want to read a whole book because it's a business book. I don't want to read a whole business book from end to end. So I said, how can I make it possible to look at one chapter and still collect value from that? So a book, you need to go, the depth is different. So the depth you go is different. But then you need to keep it consistent throughout the book. Otherwise, you confuse people. So blogs are more independent. So book, you need to think more about the concept and so on. But there are many things that blog help me. It helped me find my voice. That's one of the things that help the most.
Do you think you're going to write more books now that you've got this going? Because obviously you had the premium version of your newsletter, so that means there is a newsletter, so you already have like two, but also the Medium publications, then you do a lot of LinkedIn work. Is there going to be more? Can we expect more of you?
That's an interesting question. For now, let's say I'm growing the content based on the book. So I'm creating some more materials, like courses related to Untrapping Product Teams, lives related to this. I'm exploiting what I can get from the book, trying to help to reuse this content as much as possible to help people with this. There are indeed a few things that are speaking to me right now that I do consider writing a second book. Don't know when, don't know if, but maybe related to our conversation here. What I'm thinking a lot is, how can you be a product manager when everyone distracts you from creating value?
And yeah, but that's the same. That's the same question with being a product owner. Can you truly be a product owner if someone else is making shots for you? Then who's the actual owner?
Yeah, and one thing that is in my mind, I'm still deciding how I'm going to approach that. Probably will write a few blogs about it first, because the book came out of strong resonance from my blogs, and then I decided to move on that. And what helped me was, of course, the feedback from people like you and others that helped me leverage my writing, because I do keep my first blog there to go back and see, oh my God, how did I write this thing here? It's very crappy. But when I'm looking further now for maybe a second book, I sometimes think about leadership. How can leaders create a space where product teams can thrive? So that's one of the topics. But there is another, like the unconventional product management. Thinking maybe I'll write unconventional product manager or unconventional product management. And it's the art of driving value and the when everyone distracts you from it. Something like this I'm wondering about.
Is it building the present that is distracting a lot of product owners from adding value, in your opinion? Is that part of it, or a big part of it?
It's a resistance to step into the unknown, and also the inability of prioritizing. Everything is a priority. We need to do everything. And then the teams are stretched too thin. And beyond being trapped on the delivery, it's hard to know what success looks like when everything is a priority. You have a loaded backlog, you have loaded roadmaps, and where do you start working? When do you have time to think? Because one of the key aspects of product owners, product managers, is to make decisions. And to make decisions, you need to have space to be creative, to look at things. But what I see happening is, like, people are busy. And when you are too busy, you just don't have the mental power to adapt to reality. So there's this, everything is a priority, and then you have to focus on delivery. And then now comes this discovery, oh my God, I have to do all of this. Where do I start?
Well, we got a question from our YouTube live stream that I think kind of goes along with, which is, how would you go about creating an environment where product owners can experiment? Like, how do they, especially in a big company where maybe the normal way of working that company is going to work against them? Are there some techniques you can recommend to begin going down that path?
Well, it depends on the level you are, because if you are in a leadership position, you can make the calls automatically. If you are a product owner, you will need to get supporters. So let's look at different angles. if you are a product owner, you need to help the other see what you are seeing. That's what I say, the principle. Help the other see what you see. So first question is, why do you need to do discovery? To avoid creating features that nobody uses. So how do you help the other see that? Two ways. If you can, you need to touch the most sensitive organ of the human being. It's called the pocket. That hurts. If you touch the pocket, people are gonna complain about it. So look at the features you created over the last 12 months. How much value do they drive for the business? If you lack the data for that, maybe at least if you can say, how often are these features used? There's a big chance that 50% of these features are just forgotten. And then you can ask the question, is that the way we want to continue working? Creating features nobody uses or features that drive no value? Then you can have a conversation about it. Introduce product discovery and use also experiment. Then you need to drive value. What is value? Showing that you dropped ideas before you invested too much on them. So that's what product managers, product owners can do. Leaders can influence in a different way. Leaders can create a space for that directly.
Do you think that in many companies, let's say you get feedback that you're building something that no one's going to use, or maybe it has a high likelihood even of people aren't going to use it, even if you do it extremely well. In most companies today in 2024, do you think it's safe to say, I want to stop building this feature because I have evidence that is, even when we're done, no one's going to use it? Because we've been talking in the industry about this idea for 15 to 20 years now or more, and it is still something I see every week.
Yeah, it is very surprising. That's why I also cannot understand how we don't move beyond that. There's certain fears, and people say, well, I'm just trying to do my job. I want to I have a family to take care. Maybe if I go in this conflict here, I may lose my job. I don't want to do that. So that is a genuine interest. You want to protect your income so you can afford sustaining your family. That's okay. And what I see is we still have the way of thinking about processes. We talk about agile, but the very first thing, we are still very focused on processes. How do we ensure that we are delivering? What is the best process, and so on and so on. So answering your question, if I think it's still safe to say nowadays, one of the things I learned over time is lecturing people doesn't work. Helping them understand within experience works. Instead of lecturing people, what is the smallest thing you can do to bring some evidence to the game and then have a conversation? How do you move from lecturing to collaborating? Then you can make the decisions together. So I said about help the others see what you're seeing. What if you just get some stakeholders to watch some customers interacting with the product, and then they see what happens when the idea customers get lost or they just don't get any interest in that. So moving from lecturing to collaborating evidence, this is what I have seen helping. It's not only I believe it helps, but that's what I've seen happen. I had many situations. I had situations here in Germany. Once it happened the following. A director came to me, very influential one in the company, and he said, I want you to ensure for all clothes that we are selling, you have all the materials. And we were a discounter, just to be clear. He said, we need all the materials. I said, what makes you confident on that? He said, because I don't buy things here. I said, but you are not the kind of person who goes for a discounter. You already told me that. He said, yes, but there are some things here I would buy, but I don't see the detailed materials. I said, did you know to create that is quite complicated because we have more than 300 partners advertised on our website. I need to convince all of them to send this data if they don't have. I said, yeah, you need to make it happen. That's your job. I said, what is your assumption? He said, it's gonna increase sales dramatically. And I said, okay, let's run an experiment. Let's design the page together, how it should look like. So we did this, and then I said, let's select a high runner. And then we took a jacket, a winter jacket that was a high runner, and we put both, segmented test. It took us 2 days to run the experiment, and then after a week, we collected results. And then we looked at results and we said, what happened with this high runner? And when I showed the results to this director, he got quite surprised that actually with more materials presented there, it drove the sales down. And we add the information there. When people would bounce, they would close the tab. Like, what could we have done better? What happened? And some people said, you overloaded me with information. It seemed like cheating.
Honesty being considered to be cheating. It's a sad world slowly. Hey, we're slowly also getting to the end of this episode, but there are some questions in the chat that we want to cover. Jim, you want to take Martin's?
I asked Martin's. I thought one of the quick ones maybe is Stas asks, who's the ideal reader for your book? Like, if you could handpick the type of person to put it in, who would that be?
Product manager working with digital products for 2 to 7 years, because this person probably has seen already some of the traps I mentioned and probably is getting a little bit tired of seeing them and thinking, how can I change this? I wrote from a perspective of a product manager. I believe more people can benefit from that given the feedback that received now, but the idea would be this one.
Okay. Good. One other question I had, I think we covered all the ones in the chat, but I don't know if either of you know the name Rory Sutherland from Ogilvy, but he talked about one of the biggest problems with creativity in design right now is that it's normally a very few amount of people at the end of the process. And I know I suspect that you and Marty and others support that more people being creative and much, much earlier in the process. So if we connect that to Martin's question of like your average product owner right now beginning to experiment, how can they kind of shift left and get earlier in the process from a creative standpoint?
Mm-hmm. What I see happening right now is we are too focused on solutions very fast. Now, with the advancement of AI, there are many things like saying, how do I integrate AI with my product? It's already a solution. Do you really need AI? What kind of problem you're solving? So we need to start with the problem space. We do need to understand that. So for product owners, get out of the building, talk to your users. You don't need to ask for permission for that. It's very simple. Just go there and talk to them. And then understand what is natural for them, not what is rational for the business. Because if it's not natural for people who you are creating a product for, it's very unlikely they are going to use it. So get close to them. What could you do to get close? And these are the kind of things you don't need to ask for permission.
But that's the one. In the beginning of this recording, you also talked about kind of questions that you want to ask or think about those. But a very disheartening thing they see with a lot of developers or product managers that are actually talking to the people that they're building the product for is that they have a very limited toolkit when it comes to asking certain questions. It's always the same kind of thing over and over. So how do you prepare for that? And are there any recurring questions that you have that you feel like people should be asking these more?
Yeah, for sure. Going back to the solution, you should not name the solution in any of your questions, because then you bias people. It's like the mom test that Rob wrote the book. It's an amazing book. One of the things is about stories. So you want to get people to say what they are doing and try understanding the jobs that you are looking for. I will give you an example. There was a company here in Munich I'm not gonna give the name, but you can understand which company it is. Uh, the company wanted to develop a different navigation system, a new age navigation system, new version, super cool one. And they had a budget for that. They hired an agency to do that. But this agent said, "Why do you need that for?" And they said, "Because it's a new one." And they said, "What do you want to achieve?" It said, "To be better than our competitions." And they said, "Okay, I want to talk to some of your customers." They said, "No, you cannot talk to the customers." Then this agency started going there. It's in Munich. So they start asking the car drivers of this brand, like, "Hey, when you want to go somewhere, how do you get there?" And then the person said, "I just connect with my Apple Car, and then I use my phone here quickly, and then I get to the destination." When you are in your car, how often do you make calls? I make calls whenever I'm traveling. How was your last experience? And then you start asking about the jobs you were trying, and then you see how the person executes the job in reality. Because if you ask a question, "We are to develop a new solution here, and so what would you like to see?" People will just imagine their best self and things that they are very interested. Doesn't mean they are going to use at all. And then you get super distracted. So these would questions are very bad to ask. Another question that people misuse is the why question. Someone read this technique, 5 whys, and then you go and you ask customers, "Why did you do it? Why is it important to you?" Just reflect. When someone asks you why, what do you feel about it? Most times is challenging. It's like, you did something wrong. Why did you do it? And it doesn't matter if you change the tonality, like, why did you do it? It's still a why question. But if you ask a different question, formulating with what and how, like, what were you trying to achieve with that? You show more curiosity. And people like when you do that. Then you will learn.
Right. Yeah. I've said on this podcast many times, I had a post-it for a few years on my monitor that says, "Ask less why questions," for the exact reason you just stated. And I know that Sunder and I have the benefit of listening to all of these episodes, and we can pick up on themes. But if I had to sum up, if somebody asked me later today, what's a big takeaway from your chat with David? And if I think about our chats with people like Jeff Gotthelf and Josh Seiden, and you look at Marty's book or all the product books that I read, almost all the best stories were from some product person going against the grain, challenging something, doing something different, bucking the trend, saying, "No, I'm not going to define a product for the lowest common denominator." And I think that's, to me, one of the things that separates product management from backlog manager. Like you said earlier, is, are you willing to do something that is not safe or not normal or that nobody's done? And to your point that you just made, and I want everybody to hear this again, is you don't have to ask for permission to do most of this stuff. You don't have to spend $1. It's the old adage that I know Sunder believes in a lot, is it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And many product owners out there are limited by their own belief of what could happen. And they'll say, but, and I love to quote Ned Stark from Game of Thrones, everything before "but" is pointless, right? Like, it's really, why do they not feel comfortable doing something that maybe their peers aren't doing or that they've never done before?
Awesome. Two things I would connect to you on this one. Like, it's a very obvious thought I have. If you want to get where most people don't get, you need to do what most people don't do. It's very obvious. But then the second thought is, are you doing this because it's easy or because it's right?
I don't know, Sunder, what about you? Are you doing it because it's easy or because it's right?
Yes. It depends.
It depends. There it is. We couldn't have an episode without an "it depends."
David already sent it earlier.
Right. Okay.
But it really does depend, right? Sometimes things are right because they're easy, and sometimes it's the other way around. Uh, it's really thinking about what's the most useful thing to do right now. And as we've been teaching quite some stakeholder management classes um, lately, sometimes it's part of the politics as well to go for the easy option just for the sake of satisfying some very influential stakeholders. So it's kind of picking your battles in that sense too. Sometimes you got to keep those people satisfied, and then you take the easy way.
Yep.
But it's about reflecting, right? If you do that because you made a conscious choice, you know why you are doing that. So you decided to do that. But sometimes we pick the easy choice without even challenging. Is it the right thing to do right now?
Well, and that comes back to strategy, right? And I think we need to get our buddy Will Seal on to talk about strategy, because that's something I spend a lot of time thinking of. And David, maybe one last question about what you and Sunder were just saying is there an art form to doing the minimum amount needed to keep those stakeholders happy so that you can do the right things?
It's important to get alignment with them. I say that we need to move away from stakeholder management to stakeholder alignment. It is easier said than done, but it's a tweak here. We don't need to manage stakeholders, we need to align with them. So when I started my career, as I said, 2012, as a product manager, before I was a software developer, I thought my role was to please stakeholders. So I would go and talk to each of them one-on-one. And guess what happened? Everyone would tell me that what they needed was the most important thing. Up to the point I panicked. I didn't know what to do. And I talked to my boss, and my boss told me, he said, well, it's your job. You have to manage that, manage their expectation. The only thing I could imagine doing was the technique I'm about to share. Get everyone in the same room and then write the goal on the board and say, our current goal is this one. I have this request from you. I have 20 requests from you. I have 15 requests from you. I need us to be in the same boat. Please help me figure out what is the best bet we have in this room to get to that goal. And I remember when I shared that, believe it or not, there were 12 people in that room. 3 people immediately said, all of my requests are irrelevant to that goal. And this goal is the most important. My requests can wait. Immediately. And then other people start arguing with each other up to the point that someone said, this is where we go. And guess what I did as a product manager? I was moderating the discussion. I was focusing on the goal strategy, what you said, the goal, and then figuring out how do we align on this. And after that, I could focus on one thing at a time. And then I established something we called as the big round of prioritization. That was the name. Once a month, we would go to that room and we would talk. And things got better because we were aligned.
But isn't that the alignment? I don't want to say it's a utopia, but it also depends on the amount of stakeholders that you get and who's in that specific meeting, because every stakeholder thinks that his stuff is most important and everything needs to be finished yesterday, preferably. Alignment is something that admirably a lot of people aim for, but I do think it's unattainable.
Number will have a strong influence on how fast you reach the alignment. And for sure, if you have many stakeholders that cannot attend all the sessions, communication gets harder. How do you ensure the communication? So you need to continuously share information with the others. But one thing is you need to have something to anchor. You need to do your homework. Because if stakeholders come to you and then you say, all right, what do you need? What do you want? You are behaving more like a waiter, then you're going to end up with a loaded backlog. But if you ask stakeholders question, how does this contribute to our product vision? How does this relate to our product strategy? How does this enable us to this current goal? Which evidence do we have this is the right thing to do? And then if the stakeholder gets annoyed with you, which some people will do get annoyed, they say, I'm sorry, but my role as a product manager is to maximize value. I do need to understand where you are coming from and how your idea contributes to everything that helps us drive value. And then you, as a stakeholder, this kind of questions within the idea of finding what you can move on and what you need to drop.
You're drudging up a 5-6 year old memory for me, but the first time I helped the product owner get all those stakeholders in a room to have that conversation, it was okay. But we heard some feedback that afternoon that really made the next one way better. And the feedback was very candid. It feels like the product owner just forced their job on us, because they got all the stakeholders in a room and said, hey, these are the 15 or 20 things. I can't do them all. Which one should we do? The tweak we made, and I don't take credit for this, but it was just the outcome of some hard conversations, was the next time, which was only like 2 days later that we got that group of people back, it was, here is what we can do. And here is the impact of doing these things versus these things. How does that work? And we basically shifted it from do my job for me to let me set your expectations on a number of these plausible possibilities, let's say. So I need to think on that more, but I know we could probably keep talking about this forever, but I think there's an art to managing those stakeholder expectations. And you've also made me think that maybe stakeholder management isn't the right way, because most people don't like feeling managed. They like feeling heard. They like feeling aligned. Management can make people feel either like they're just a cog in a machine or like they're being manipulated.
And I want to feel that they contribute. There's a sense of purpose. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about feeling heard. It's also about my voice actually matters. Like it's fun in games that you've heard me, that you listened to me. There's got to be something after that.
Yeah.
And this is one thing I like helping teams understand. We're talking about stakeholders here, which is a term that creates a lot of confusion, because anyone or anything who has any interaction whatsoever with the product is a stakeholder. I'm mainly relating here to the business people. But when it comes to the business people or business stakeholders, they are not your customers, but they are also not your enemies. So you do need them. They are your partners, because it's very unlikely that any product person will know everything on how to create the product. So once you start moving from management to alignment, then you can collaborate, as you said, Sandra. They need to feel heard to contribute, like saying like, hey, this is something that we are going to work on. That's the problem we are trying to solve. That is the scenario of this problem. And which solution could we create together? You can get these guys, these stakeholders, to ideate with you. Don't exclude them. Don't tell them too late that you decide to do something that they just don't commit to that. They disagree with you. You can involve them. And one thing that we talked, Martin Dauman, he shared on a podcast with me, actually. I took that with me. You need to build relationship with stakeholders before you need those relationships.
That's the thing. How do you get there? But also the point of, how do you call that? Being aware that this is the case, because it's really easy to get sucked in the day-to-day cogs, the whole feature factory, but also the rest of the factory, with overhead, with the stakeholders, with not being able to actually talk to users in many cases. So it's really hard to be aware of these kind of things, and this is the actual thing that you should be doing. How do you get separated from that trap?
Well, and isn't that true of all parts of life? Like, if I was only friends with Sunder when I needed him, he's going to stop taking my call, rightfully so. Like, you need to build those relationships when you don't need them, so that they are there when you do need them. And they're two-way streets. And yeah, I find myself advising all types of people, not just product managers, building those relationships, getting to know people when it's not critical, so that if it ever is critical, you can reach out. And it's not like, if maybe you have a bad release, well, you don't want the first time that somebody's heard from you in 6 months to be when the proverbial shit's hitting the fan. Like, you probably want to have something a little more recent to fall back on, to say, hey, I know I'm calling you out of the blue. Here's how I need you to save my bacon right now.
But then at least you're honest. I mean, how often do you have these conversations with stakeholders that seemingly are interested in you for half an hour, and then we'll drop the bomb like, all right, here's what I want you to do.
Oh, sure. It goes both ways. It doesn't just fall to the product manager or the product designer there. It goes both ways, but I think you can probably sleep well at night if you've done your 50% of extending that olive branch and building those relationships, but you can't force somebody to pick up their half of that relationship.
What's your experience in that, David? What's your opinion?
I had a multitude of experience on that, actually. But my experience summarized: the less you involve stakeholders, the more problems you have. And the more honest and vulnerable you are, the more they are going to support you. So if you are very honest, I will tell you one thing that happened once. We had a very shitty sprint and we failed dramatically. And I was having another type of problem because back then, I was a product owner. No software engineer who wanted to present during the sprint reviews. And I was telling them, hey, I should not be the one running the show. It should be something that you present what we created. And they don't perceive me as the manager from you as they do all the time. So let's do something more collaboratively. And that particular day, I aimed to let the software engineers present. So we agreed on that. The sprint was a disaster. We arrived in the room. And then I saw the CEO arriving. And the CEO attended every third or fourth sprint review and decided to show up on this one. Said, oh, now leaving the software engineers to fail in front of the CEO is not going to be nice from my side. And I said, how do I do this one? I look at the guys and said, I get this one. And I said, we failed the sprint. We aimed too high and we didn't reach, but we learned a lot. And then I shared, and then I said, we don't have anything to present because we got trapped into details, technical aspects, and unfortunately, we are here to talk about our failure. And then the CEO said, I truly appreciate that. You're talking openly about this. And I want to know what you learned. And then he asked particular what we learned from this lesson, and we shared the learnings. And then this vulnerability helped him open up with another thing. He said, well, as you were very honest with what happened, I want to be honest with some ideas that I have in my mind, but they are very undigested thoughts. So please feel free to challenge anything I should say. And then he opened up on business models he was considering and things like that. He didn't ask anyone to act. He wanted to learn. And then I said, that only happened because we were straight to the point. We failed. We said we failed. That's it. But that helped. Vulnerability, being honest, transparent. Don't try making up things. And people will see if you're trying. And in this case, it helped. Because in the end of the day, we're social humans, right?
Yeah, but it means that you got to be very comfortable with yourself in that sense as well, and know what you stand for, how you do that, and how to approach people. And ultimately, that will become your go-to attitude. Let's stick to that. Speaking of which, there's also a question related to that. I recently seen a stakeholder map with 40 plus stakeholders. Do you have some practices to narrow your go-to people group? That's going to be the last question, and that's when we're going to start bringing this one home.
I think it's important to separate stakeholders. Not all of them are the same. So when we talk about stakeholders, who are we talking about? Are we talking about business people, project sponsor, users, customers? Let's try separate them in buckets, and that could help us have a better metrics. Because if we put everyone inside the same bucket, we will struggle. Because, for example, when we learn from users that they don't understand how to use the product, that should have a higher importance than when a business person is complaining that I don't understand how to use a product. That person is not a user. So I prefer separating, then you can use the metrics and so on, but don't put everyone on the same bucket. That's my old recommendation on how you can structure.
Nice. That requires so much practice because it's structuring is one, but finding the feeling it, like there's a difference between structuring and actually experiencing that. That's not going to go over in just a single night.
No.
How long did it take for you before you had that in a zone where you could be, where you felt like this is effective?
It's something iteratively. I think it took around 6 months. The very first one I created there, I misunderstood everything, who were the influential stakeholders. And then I started letting the louder ones drive the direction. And then I had a problem with the real influential ones. So I had to adapt. So in the beginning, when you craft something, you need to share with others so you can iterate. You need to know who to share to in your organization, and so someone who knows people there would be helpful. And then iterate once a month based on what you have observed, and then you adapt that, and then it starts becoming more useful. But if you just create as an artifact, you put in the drawer and forget about it, then that's not going to help you.
No, that and something that I've seen way too often as well is that these stakeholder maps and these strategies and these thoughts and concepts are being designed once, and then it's like they're written in stone. While in fact, you got to keep revisiting them. And like what you're saying here, like every half a year or maybe even every 3 months, keep checking in whether this is still the thing that we need to do and this is still valid or not.
Yep.
All right. Maybe absolute last one. If there's one key aspect in your book, what would it be?
One key aspect in my book, what would that be? One key aspect in the book is no matter where you are, no matter what you do, you can drive change. Small proportion. There's always something you can do. Can start from different angles, but it is possible to act today for a better tomorrow. The question is, are you up for the challenge? Because it's going to be challenging. It's not everything easy. You need to like this. As I said in the beginning, I do like driving change and I get excitement about it. But sometimes I do receive a hammer on my head and that hurts. Yeah, it does hurt. But then I'm resilient, Rocky Balboa. Okay, I get beaten and I go again and again and again. So one key thing, there's always something you can do. And a principle, it resonated a lot what Jim said. But what if that happens? Focus on current problems over future problems. There are problems staring at your face. Those are the ones you need to take care of.
Exactly.
Don't think about the other ones.
So many what if statements and scenarios and doom and gloom. Let's focus on the things that are relevant right now. Let's tackle those. David, it was a pleasure having you here again. Second time. Hopefully not the last one. And if there's going to be another book, dibs on the first podcast.
Perfect. Nice.
Jim, any last remarks from your side?
No, just we got to have some guests on that don't give me a whole bunch of homework and make me think about a whole bunch of things and add it to my backlog. So thank you, David, for challenging some thoughts, giving our listeners and us some valuable insights. I wish your book and you the best.
Thank you.
All right, Matt. Enjoy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's glad to be here. See you.